Two stories tonight about human achievement and the quest for overcoming obstacles, and they come from the sports of mountain climbing and golf. Mountain climbing first, and Mount Everest, which has fascinated man for centuries. It is foreboding, it is beautiful, it is mysterious. ABC's Mark Litke is at Mount Everest.
It's been a remarkable week of firsts on the world's highest peak, but perhaps the most inspiring first today was that of 36-year-old American Gary Guller, who lost his left arm in a climbing accident 4 years ago. He had led a team of Texans with disabilities on a grueling 17-day trek to Everest Base Camp, a remarkable Everest first in its own right. But then Guller immediately began his own assault on the summit, the first attempt by a climber with one arm. It was treacherous from the start, as fierce winds slowed his team's advance for days.
We're experiencing some pretty high winds and pretty sucked in with clouds.
But as fast as it deteriorates, weather can suddenly improve on Everest. And after a 17-hour final push today, Gary Guller stood on top of the world.
Yay. You know, I have watched that video. Good morning, everybody. I have watched that video probably more than 20,000 times in my life. And I promise you from my heart, every time I see it, either on stage in front of thousands of people or virtually in front of thousands, my heart, like it starts like beating really, really fast, and my hands get sort of really sweaty, and honestly, I get quite nervous because it's still hard for me. It's still hard for me to like know that that really happened. And when I hear Charlie Gibson from ABC News, and he's saying Everest and the summit and my name, I hope that feeling never, ever goes away. I mean, I was a teenager. Somebody showed me a book of the Himalaya Mountains. And at that moment, you know, I can't honestly say at that moment, I thought I'm going to stand on top of the world. But at that moment, I thought, you know what, Gary, you're going to do something big, and you're going to do something really big in your life. And I started climbing, and unfortunately, after 4 or 5 years of a lot of intense training, I was involved in a terrible, terrible mountain climbing accident. And I lost my best friend, and my other friend was severely hurt. And I ended up breaking my neck and losing my arm. And honestly, I thought my whole life of climbing mountains just came to this very quick ending as a young man. And I moved back to Europe to be closer to my family after being released from the hospital and rehab, etc. And I'll never forget my grandfather coming up to me, and he knew that I was a little bit lost in my life. And he put his big hands around my face and he said, Gary, he said, you've got to find that light you had when you were a child, that dream. You can still make that true, and you can make it happen. And he said, if there's not a person in the world that has climbed some of the highest mountains with one arm, he said, Gary, you be the first. You be the first. And that's when it all started again. And after a number of years of just practicing and having a mentor and learning and asking a lot of questions and having to change and adapt my way of climbing, I moved back to the US. And I received this call, and this gentleman wanted me to come to his conference and give a presentation. And I kid you not, I have never been so nervous in my entire life. I had never ever given a presentation, but he asked me in such just a gracious way, and it was very kind. And he supplied me with an airline ticket, and he put me up in the hotel, and they brought me food to my room. And this is the first experience this has ever happened to me. And after the presentation, it was a dark room, and it was just a simple slideshow kind of presentation. I really didn't have any direction, and I was very nervous. But when the lights went on after the presentation, I looked out into the audience, and probably half the people in the audience had some sort of pretty severe physical disability. And at the back of the audience, I see this hand. And this person is struggling with everything that he has to show me his hand because he would like to ask me a question. So I walked back to the back of the room, and I could see this person could only move one part of his body. And I looked at this gentleman, and I was, yes, sir, do you have a question? And I'll never forget this for as long as I live. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, Mr. Guller, would you ever take somebody like me to some of the places that you've been? And we're great friends now, but I looked at him and in my mind, I'm thinking, not only can you only move one part of your body, you have to be a little bit crazy at the same time, because if you think about altitude, cold weather, travel, very remote countries, you know, it's just really not possible. I'm thinking in my head very quickly, but I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to answer this person. And then all of a sudden, it was this life-changing moment in my life. I remember thinking to myself, Gary, you don't have the right to choose for this person what they may or may not want to achieve based on just what you're looking at. And I've spent so many years in the tents with my Sherpa friends on big expeditions, on trekking trips, on adventure trips. And the greatest gift I've learned from the Sherpa people is that they have this wonderful ability to look beyond what they see. And if you look to a human's heart first, regardless of disability, regardless of color, regardless of culture, orientation, whatever, look to their heart first. That's when amazing things happen. And I remember then thinking that very fast to myself. Then I said to the gentleman, why not? We exchanged phone numbers. And in 2 or 3 weeks, I called him and I said, you know, my dream as a kid was to stand on top of the world. And I was so inspired by that conference where we met. I want to take the largest cross-disability team ever to join me and become the most diverse team ever to reach Mount Everest Base Camp. And after that success, I will then go on and carry the flag and carry the message that together anything really is possible. If people come together and they act together and think together and treat each other fairly and equally, almost anything in the world can be achieved. And God, I'll never forget this either. So I put out this press release, and within like a month, I had 30 people. I had to cap the expedition. And 15, almost 16 of those folks had varying degrees of physical challenges. Some with paraplegia, 4 or 5 folks in wheelchairs, some that couldn't hear, folks that had never been on a camping trip before wanted to sign on to this expedition. So I had to go out like immediately and start, because when I put pencil to paper, obviously the cost was very, very high. It was almost $500,000. And I had minus 137 in the bank, right? So I had to go knock around doors. And 2.5 years later, after 300 plus doors, we finally had enough money. We take this flight from all over the US to LA, and then to Thailand, and then to Kathmandu. And for people that had never been to some parts of the world, especially Kathmandu, Nepal, you have to give them a couple of days just to acclimate, not to the mountain, just acclimate to the culture, the cuisine, the rickshaws, you know, everything, the sounds, the smells. And I did. And, you know, I'm sitting on a rooftop having a tea with my Sherpa friend, best friend, brother, and we hear all this commotion in the streets of Kathmandu, and we look over the edge of his rooftop, and we see our whole expedition kind of moving through the alleyways. But it wasn't just our team that we saw. They had somehow gathered like 2,500 people from the local community, and all this interaction is happening. They're asking about the expedition team. They're asking about their families. You saw men, you saw women, you saw children, you saw people with physical challenges come out and start this interaction. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm watching these people that are not even actually part of the expedition, going in front of the team and stopping the traffic, putting old rugs over like ruts in the road so the guys and the girls in the wheelchairs wouldn't have any issues. And I'm thinking, oh my God, these people are working on our behalf for our success. And I'm not even aware of it. I'm just watching it happen. They don't know me. They didn't even meet this team 2 weeks ago or 2 days ago. But they're doing what they can from their heart because they felt our energy. So much so that we went to the airport in Kathmandu, the owners of the aircraft took the seats out of one of the airplanes so the guys and the girls in the wheelchairs, we could load them very quickly, very fast, because the weather window is very, very tight. And if you don't take off straight away and land in the mountains, then it can be a week or 2 weeks delay, and we didn't have that in budget nor the itinerary. So we take this flight, we land in the Himalaya Mountains, and some of the first, I speak a bit in Nepali, and some of the first words I heard when we landed was, Gary's back. They're not going to make it very far. This group, you know, this is the Himalayas, right? I went back to the team and I told the team that, and I've never seen eyes light up as much as I saw that afternoon. I mean, just imagine for a second, most of these folks have been told no their entire life. And look where they are already, in the mountains of the Himalayas, right? The next morning, we're the first expedition, like on the trail, making our way to Mount Everest Base Camp. And they thought we was going to only make it 2 or 3 days. But we made it past 2 or 3 days. And on day 7, you make it to this one village. And this village is very, very important. There's this very old man in this village. I don't mean just old, like 50, 53. This guy's like 453 years old. And the idea is that you go and see this old man and he gives you a blessing. So I walked to the top of the village with my Sherpa friend. We're trying to figure out how we can convince this old man to give like 250, not just our expedition members, but our support staff and our team, a blessing and one of these necklaces. By the time we arrived to his small little hut at the top of the mountain, out he comes. And back then he was a very large man. He walks right past Nima Dawa Sherpa and myself and goes to the bottom of the village and opens up this monastery. And I kid you not, it was one of those days, it was like I was about to snow. It was gray. It could possibly sleet, rain. And he sat in the courtyard. And when he sat in the courtyard, the clouds just moved away. And he sat there for the best part of 6 or 7 hours and gave every one of us a blessing and one of these necklaces. And 17 days later, we limped, cried, crawled, laughed, hugged, kissed our way to Mount Everest Base Camp at 17,500 feet. The most successful, diverse expedition ever to reach this area. And after 2 or 3 days of celebrating, the team had to fly back home to Kathmandu first, and then back to the US. The next phase of the expedition, another 6 more weeks, was the climbing phase. To get from base camp to Camp 1, you go through what they call the Kumble Ice Wall. And it's one of the scariest places in the world. I hope I never have to go back through the Kumble Ice Wall again. There's avalanches that are happening. There's crevasses that you can't see the bottom of. You have to cross these crevasses on these old rickety ladders. It's just scary. I mean, it is so scary. So Nima Dawa and myself, we leave base camp to go to the Kumble Ice Fall. And we're about halfway through the ice fall when we hear this boom, boom, boom. And I looked at Nima and he looked at me, and we knew something broke somewhere. We just couldn't see it. So we picked up our pace and we started climbing faster, or as fast as you can at 20,000 feet for the first time. And then we heard it again, boom, boom, boom. And we looked up and this avalanche is coming right toward us. And Nima looks at me and I look at him, and we just put our arms around each other. In a way, it was like a quick goodbye. We knew this was the end. And as this avalanche was getting closer and closer to us, and you could start feeling the avalanche actually hitting you on your helmet and your shoulders, Nima just let go of me, and he walked right into the path of this avalanche. And he reaches into his pocket and he throws something 3 times in the path of this avalanche. And he comes back very quickly and he squeezed me like I'd never been squeezed before in my life. And it felt like a lifetime. I mean, honestly, it was probably only just a few seconds. And then all of a sudden, everything just stopped. I mean, it was quiet. And I opened my eyes, and I knew Nima was very close to me. I couldn't see him, but obviously we could smell each other, you know? And as the debris and the dust and the ice all settled, we realized that we were alive. And I brushed off the ice and the snow from Nima and his face. And I said, Nima, what did you throw in the path of that avalanche? Well, apparently, when I went back to Kathmandu to say goodbye to the base camp team, Nima went back to that village and he paid another visit to that 453-year-old man. And he asked that old man for a special blessing. And that old man gave Nima some rice. And he told Nima, if danger comes your way, use the rice and throw it 3 times in the path of the danger, and you'll be all right. Was it the rice? I don't know. Was it that 453-year-old man? I don't know for sure either. But over my life, I think I have figured it out. See, Nima believed in that old man, and Nima believed in that rice. And I believed in Nima, and Nima also believed in me. And that's what got us through. It's a simple word, right? But it's so important. Belief in each other. Because if he would have went one way and I another, I would not be here this morning, even sharing the story with you. I know it. But belief, it is so important in yourself and other people. I mean, it's the greatest lesson perhaps I've ever learned. And we carried that belief to Camp 2, then to Camp 3, Camp 4 at 8,000 meters, 25,000 feet or so, the death zone. And we arrived to Camp 4, and we had to sit at 25,000 feet for the best part of 3 days because the wind just did not stop. And on the third night, I remember telling Nima and my other Sherpa friends that if this wind doesn't stop, this expedition has to come to an end. But let's get ready and believe that possibly, maybe, the wind will stop. And I kid you not, at 7:30 on the 22nd of May, I unzipped the zipper of the tent. And when I got to the end, the wind went from like 100 miles an hour to like 0. It happened that quickly. And we couldn't believe it. We got up straight away and started climbing on Everest from Camp 4. You basically climb all night. And when the sun is coming up, you're at this area called the balcony. It's a little bit. If you look at a picture of Everest or photo of Everest, you'll see a little place that sort of sticks out like a balcony. We arrived there at sunrise. And oh my God, I remember the sun coming up and looking to the north, and I could see almost all the way into Tibet, into China. And then I remember looking to the south, and it's like, God, it seemed I could see all the way like to southern India, all the way down to Kerala. And we kept climbing, and like for 3 or 4 more hours up the southeast ridge, we finally made it to what they call the South Summit. And for me, I had never been this high. When you get to the South Summit, you're like, oh my God, you understand why people stop right there and turn around and go home, because it drops down a little bit. Then there's this knife edge. It seems like it goes on forever. And Nima dropped down in front of me, and he's climbing in front, and we're kind of doing this, and it was very icy and very steep. I'm looking over the edge. That's 10,000 feet straight to Tibet. I'm looking to my left, and that's a very quick trip down to Camp 2, and I'm thinking, Guller, just keep it cool, keep it together. You can do this. And toward the very end of this edge is what they call the Hillary Step. And it's this real awkward rock formation named after Sir Edmund Hillary. It's just very awkward. And Nima's already at the top of it. I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh my God. Finally, I saw this sliver of ice, and I thought if I can get my crampon into that sliver of ice and then put my axe into that ice and pull with everything that I have in my heart and my life. I mean, I was all in. There were so many people around the world that were supporting this whole expedition. I had to try. And I'll never forget, ever, 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 I reached out with my crampon, and I reached up with my ice axe. It stuck in the ice, and I pulled with everything that I had, and I froze. I froze. And I looked between my legs, and I saw nothing but air for like 10,000 feet. And I was like, Gary, you have got to see this through. You have got to see this through. Get it together. And I don't share this with everybody. It was one of those moments in my life when I really gave myself the permission to succeed. And sometimes throughout life, as a youngster, as you get older, at different times, you have to remind yourself, you live a good life, you do the right things, you're kind, you're compassionate to other people. You also have the right to succeed as well, and succeed with your dreams. And at that time, I said, Gary, give yourself the permission to succeed. And before I knew it, it was like a big, big wind just picked me up and sat me right beside Nima. And you know, you're about an hour from the summit. I've been thinking about this moment for 25 years. And we start climbing, and I could barely raise my head because I can't get enough oxygen. And I'm so very tired. And then I feel this tap on my leg. And it's in this broken Sherpa English language. And it says, congratulations, Gary, congratulations. And I raised my head up, like you can see behind me. I raised my head up, and I saw these little prayer flags blowing on top of the world. And at that point, I knew I was going to make it. And if you're wondering, well, that's awesome, Gary. What do you do when you get there? I'm there near the day Sir Edmund and Tenzing Norgay stood in this exact same spot. I'm there by myself with 4 of my closest, most supportive Sherpa brothers. And we arrived at the summit. We got on our hands and knees. Of course, we prayed, we cried, took some photos, and then Nima Dawa hands me the walkie-talkie, and he said, Gary, make the call. Make the call. Summit team here, summit team. Summit team, I'm calling down to base camp. We're standing on the summit. We're standing on the summit. We have succeeded. We have succeeded. It's what I heard on the other end of the walkie-talkie that made it so very special. It seemed like I could hear celebrations from all the people at base camp, from all over the world. The Korean team, Japanese team, the American team, the Russian team, the Indian team, the English team, the French team. You can always hear the Colombian team, right? The Canadians. And that's when I realized they too understood what this whole expedition was about. It wasn't about just one guy with one arm standing on top of the world. It wasn't about a person in a wheelchair making it to Mount Everest Base Camp. This was about people from all walks of life, from many different types of backgrounds, coming together to achieve something that had never been achieved before through 3 very basic principles: kindness, compassion, and belief in each other. And on that note, I'm going to wrap this up with one final short little video just to remind us that, one, this is a true story. This was not made up. This was people and sacrifice and success and hardship, but support and belief. Enjoy this video.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Guller, for sharing your, touching and inspirational story with all of us. And, we can take a lot, from your story. And I know that a lot of our students have, questions that they'd like to ask, personally to you. And so if there are any questions, we'd like to take some in our chat box. And even though we won't be able to take everyone's questions, we'd like to go through as many questions as we can. So you guys can take the time to post the questions that you have, and then we'll have a Q&A session with Mr. Guller. And we don't get this chance every day to be able to speak with someone, who climbed Mount Everest, let alone with one arm. And so it's really a privilege and honor to have you speak to us here. And I think a point that really stuck with me is the fact that you didn't do this by yourself, although, you are the person who was the first man to climb Mount Everest with one arm. You talked a lot about how the people around you, the Sherpas and, even the people from the village, they supported you from their hearts and when they saw your energy. So I believe that even for us as well, it's not that we're able to succeed and do well on our own, but it is because of the support system around us and the, the people near us who really push for us and encourage us that we're able to push forward and succeed. So I'd like to really thank you for your time and your energy here. And so we're going to start taking questions. So first we have Natalie Robinson, and we're going to go ahead and unmute the students so that they can personally ask the questions to you directly. So we'll have first Natalie.
Hi, I just wanted to know, did you ever feel like giving up? And if you did, how did you overcome that?
Hi, Natalie. Yeah, thanks for that question. Did I feel like giving up? Honestly, there was a couple of times. There really was. It's very, very steep on the Lhotse face climbing to Camp 3. And I was so very tired when I woke up the next morning. And I mean, my whole right side, it was like it was numb. And that was really the first time on the whole expedition. And I remember getting out of my tent and putting on the crampons, my backpack and everything, ready to go to Camp 4. And I probably climbed, and I mean, it was really, really steep. And I probably climbed like 3 or 4 feet. And I just stopped. And I sat down and I just put my head like just almost sort of between my legs on my knees. And I just thought about everything, like my whole life for a second, because I was so tired. And then I thought, these guys and these girls that had some of them never been on a camping trip before, the belief and the trust that came on this expedition and the suffering that they also went through, and they never, ever gave up. And they had so many reasons that it would have been okay for them to have given up, right? They didn't, and they stayed, and they made it despite the challenges, right? And I thought, at least for them, start climbing. Keep just putting one foot in front of the other. Try not to give up. Have belief in yourself. Dig a little bit deeper. And I made it to Camp 4, right? And after 3 nights at 25,000 feet, I had to think about that too, right? Because it was very tiring to live at that altitude. But yes, to answer your question very shortly, yes, and I'm glad I didn't.
Okay, thank you so much for that answer. This time we'll have Jessica Pham will ask her question.
Oh, what point in your life that you decide that this is the time to prepare this trip with everyone?
That moment happened. This particular trip, I've been on many expeditions in my life, but this particular expedition, that moment happened when I walked to the back of that audience And that member that could only move one part of his body, which came on the expedition as well, his name is Gene, and we're still very good friends. When he looked me in the eye and he said, "Mr. Guller, would you ever take somebody like me to some of the places that you've been to?" That's when I decided. I was so inspired by that conference. There were not just people with disabilities. There was also their wives, their husbands, their teachers, their employers, their family members, their assistants. It was everybody in the community coming together. And because this person, you know, in his mind, like he also wanted to go to the Himalayas, all, you know, in his life. And he never thought he could do it because of his physical, because of his own accident. But he wanted to try. He wanted to be part of something larger than just himself. But the fact is that he asked and wanted to try, started everything off from that moment. I mean, everything. I mean, just it inspired me so much that it gave me belief that I could realize this dream that I had when I was 15. And I could also be part of a very unique team to base camp and show the world that anything is possible together.
Thank you. Can we show a raise of hands if there's anyone who'd like to ask a question?
I do see the little chats coming up. I think they're very nice.
See, okay, so we have one from Portia Spencer.
Hello.
Good morning.
Jeremy, good morning. Your mindset is really amazing. And I would say, would you come up with
So I think it broke up a little bit, but I will just reiterate what she said.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yes, your mindset is amazing. How did you come to have this kind of mindset? How are you able to develop and grow this mindset?
I mean, great question. Good question. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've always been my parents and my grandparents. I've been very determined. Like once I set my mind to something since I've been a child, right? But I have to say that after my accident when I was 20, I had 4 or 5 years after that accident where I was going everywhere and at the same time going nowhere. So I know what it's like to be at the bottom of the world, and I'm not really meaning Antarctica. And obviously I know what it's like to be at the top of the world, and I kind of prefer it up there. Because it was very difficult for me for those 4 or 5 years. I really thought my life was over in a sense. And I know there are people that have much more severe accidents and challenges than what I had. But, you know, to me, I just wanted to kind of be an adventure climber kind of person and see the world and see the culture and meet the people of the world. And when I lost my arm, I really thought that was over. And you know, it took a few friends and supporters to pick me up. And some of those final steps to the summit, honestly, were for those people that didn't give up on me. When I gave them opportunity to give up on me, plenty of opportunities, but a lot of people, friends, family, did not. They believed in me, even through the difficult time. And that renewed that determination and that passion that I had before the accident. And those last few feet, again, to the very top of the world, I remember very clearly thinking of them and their continued and their utter support. And I was like, this is also for you. This is for you. Because without that, there's no way that I would be here. And it's kind of been pretty renewed since then. I mean, I'm human like everybody else. I have my good days and my not so good days, but you know, I do wake up. I can honestly say I wake up every morning pretty much with bright lights going on.
Okay. So we have another question that was posed from Solid Kim. So if we can unmute her and have her ask her question.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, what is your future plan from now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure everybody heard that. What are my future plans? I mean, I was very blessed after Everest to, you know, achieve some of my other dreams, which was climbing Cho Oyu and then the Marathon des Sables in the Sahara. And then I wanted to, at one stage in my life, do an Ironman, which I had to sort of reinvent how a guy with one arm swims, you know, a mile plus. So that was a huge, huge challenge. And I think my next big challenge is one to concentrate. I do have a foundation and we support children with three main focuses: health, education, and safety in very challenging parts of the world. And it's very new. It is very young, and we have a nice support base, and roughly 99+% of anything that we receive goes direct to source. But again, these are children in very challenging countries. So, you know, we can get a whole lot of pencils and notebooks for $50 or $100. I want to focus a bit more on that. And the same with, you know, the unfortunate world situation when it comes to world slavery still, and child trafficking as well, to try to raise some more awareness and provide, I hope, even some very small safe areas in some of the countries that we operate the foundation in. So somebody that maybe gets lost in the world for whatever reason, even not their own, they have a place that if they can find a safe and warm home. So that's really my future plans, right? I mean, with this unfortunate COVID-19 that's happening to everyone, you know, traveling the world and speaking in front of people is very, very challenging. I mean, travel is I love people and I love culture and I love experiencing other culture. So when that happens again, that will make it easier for me to go to where my foundation operates. And in the meantime, just learn more about what's happening sometimes in the shadows around the world. So yeah, thanks for the question. And that's kind of where, that's the direction I think I'm headed. I mean, staying fit and healthy and happy and, you know, doing the right thing and eating the right food and trying not to play too much with my friends, of course, right? But the big picture is the foundation.